Hi, and welcome to the Change Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Eric. In this third conversation with Dr. Kevin Mays, we move beyond the chaos and into the inner mechanics of leadership. This episode explores why capable leaders still struggle under pressure, how emotional regulation shapes decision quality, and what it takes to really develop other leaders, not just followers. This is going to be a practical, grounded discussion on self-mastery, influence, and leadership. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Go to our YouTube channel and subscribe there, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. Now on to the show. Dr. Mays, thank you so much for joining me again. It's very, very good to see you again.
I am excited to be here again. We have the best conversations, and I'm excited because there is so much to dig into.
There is. Now, in our earlier conversations, we were going over the ideas and talking more about leadership challenges and how they're not always necessarily technical or strategic in that way, but there's a lot of personal influence there. And leaders tend to be surrounded by frameworks and tools and plans and all this structured information and things that they have. But a lot of them, they still find themselves stalled out or frustrated. And what's interesting is that the struggle they often talk about is not so much about what they don't know, but it's about how they relate to themselves in the role. And in that last conversation, I'm curious, since we had that last conversation, where do you see leaders struggling the most when it comes to looking at themselves inwardly? Because that's, lead yourself first is kind of where you come from.
That's right. That's right. Lead yourself first. The book is out. Look for it now. Very excited. Okay. Well, the electronic version, the hard launch is on March 4th.
Okay, great. Because I think the last time we spoke, that wasn't necessarily set in stone, right?
It was not. So March 4th is the launch day. I'm super excited.
Mark your calendars.
Yeah. Yes. And I love it. I live and breathe this stuff. Today, I had a conversation with a leader of an organization who was struggling because I had been working with a couple of his supervisors to help create more of a leadership team and recognize that because the reason they were supervisors was because they were good at the task. Mm-hmm. And so what do? We promote them into a new role, and they had no skill and did not belong in the role of supervisor. Some people just don't have that skill set. And now I believe we can learn it. And that's part of my own bias. I believe anybody can learn to relate to people, but they were so task focused and good at getting stuff done that it completely undermined their ability to manage their relationships and to truly lead. Mm-hmm. Because instead of elevating other people, they command and control and told people what to do, and it got frustrated when they didn't do it. And then they got short and reactive. It was absolutely amazing. And my feedback to the leader was, not everybody is built to be a leader. It's a totally different skill set, and it requires that foundation and ability to have self-awareness, to be able to, with self-awareness, then you're in a position of choice. Without it, and what I've seen with these individuals who are experts in their field, they just brought their expertise, and they were always right in their mind. And so they were always frustrated because they didn't feel heard, they didn't feel listened to, they didn't know how to manage the human dynamics that were at play. And because of that, it was really undermining the success of the organization in a way that was getting in the way of it achieving its goals. So recognize that while we all have the ability to be self-aware, it's a much further journey for some than others. And quite frankly, it's so much easier to just be right all the time, right? I mean, ignorance is bliss. We make others, we villainize, make others wrong. I'm right. And if you need any examples, just turn on your TV. Yeah. In my mind, those are examples of that. That's not leadership. That's not what leadership is. What we see going on in the world today is not leadership. I wouldn't say in the world. I would say closer to home. The American demonstration is a great examples of what leadership is not. And I think it's really important when I think about the leaders I work with, and just for the listeners to even pause and ask yourself, what does it mean to be a leader? That's a starting point. Because if it's just about getting your way, and which I see so many people, it's like we at any cost. That's not leadership. Now, leadership is about elevating others and leading yourself so that you become elevated, so that you let go of your ego, so that you become a version of yourself that unleashes the potential and the power of the positivity in humanity.
Yep. Yep. I
And
want to pull on
somehow
that
that gets
thread for a
lost.
second.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a time when you could look to American leadership and it would be a million examples of how to do this. And now you're right, absolutely right. I agree with you that now you just see examples of what not to do. And when you see a plethora of negative examples of how not to lead, I mean, that's a signal for people to wake up and change things. As you talked about the internal introspective portion of a leader, to be yourself, to look inside and say these things. When leaders try to do this, they often see these things where they say, "Oh, I'm a misdiagnosis as an external problem, not me." Like you said, I'm right. The problem that I have is over there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, well, it's so interesting. And I spend chapters talking about this and how in a lifetime, right? Understanding that it comes back in my mind to our attachment and our need to be attached to our self-concept, our ego identity, and our worldview. Because when we do that, it validates us sometimes. And that validation covers this hole that we all experience. Everybody's got it, right? That hole of kind of self-doubt that creeps in. I think of it as your ghost, right? We all have this ghost that when things don't go our way, sometimes that uncertainty or insecurity will hit us. And in order to keep that at bay, what I find real powerful narcissists do is just attach themselves to their cognitive framework and to their worldview. And they know that they know that they know that they're absolutely right beyond a doubt. And
Yep.
whenever that's you that knows that you're right beyond a doubt, then you're on a slippery slope because we don't see the world as it is. We see the world through our lens, through our cognitive bias. And you have to understand that. Step one, that is this self-awareness, to understand we have this lens. You need to pull it off and begin to at least be curious about it. That curiosity is something I see in really bad leaders. It lacks. There's a lack of curiosity in really people. I don't even like to qualify them as leaders,
Right.
because to me, leadership is the first and foremost people who have that ability to be aware and to be curious and to be interested and to use themselves, their personality as a vehicle towards an ethical end. And when I say ethical, moral, that's the interesting thing I've been really considering lately in my head. Underneath it all, regardless of there is some universal human platform of what is right and what is not. It's hard because we want to attach it to our social construct, but I love it. There's some ancient, back before we were in this more dualistic phase of science where we tried to understand the mind and the body externally, when people just meditated and looked from within and recognized that the content of your thinking drove the nature of your reality. And when you change your thinking, you change your reality. And so I from that pivot point, you think about, why we talk about doing the right thing for other people is so key, is it also creates that better world for us.
Yeah.
And it's all tied together. And so, there's a lot of miserable people out there. When you behave in a way that creates harm to others, you do that from an agitated state of mind, from misery in your own state of mind. And that's just unfortunate for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is. I want to move to the famous genius robot and caveman brain. I was listening to some content you put out today about that, and it made me think of this question. Many leaders are highly intelligent, they're experienced, they're self-aware. Maybe they've gotten past this first question. And yet, under pressure, they still kind of react in ways that they really later regret. And this is that reference to the genius brain, the robot brain, and the caveman brain that you talk about in your book and that you've talked about online. This gap between knowing and doing is one of the most confusing experiences that a leader can face, especially when the stakes are really high or the visibility on them and how they're performing is really constant. Why do capable leaders, why do they still get hijacked emotionally or cognitively under this
Yes.
pressure when they know better?
Isn't it amazing? I've asked thousands of leaders, tell me about your leadership style. And they have glowing things to say about they're servant oriented, they are people focused. I'm like, okay, so what happens when things don't go your way?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I get short and condescending. I'm like, well, maybe that's your leadership style, because that's what people remember.
Yep.
So it goes, in my mind, full circle. It goes back to the sense that in order to be okay, we learn, and it's really the scripting that we put in our brains early on, right? It's the when we learn to kind of wire our software in the world. We came in without it, no patterns in our thinking. We have experiences, and then we learn over time that as long as I do this thing, I get my survival needs met.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets wired into our brain, the neural fabric of our brain, to the extent that when I think I said this before, we're 3 years old and our brain is forming 1 million neural connections a minute. Now we're learning to be, as long as I'm right, I survive. As long as I'm capable, as long as I'm the good boy, as long as I'm the charming manipulator or the mediator or the family hero, we learn to play a role, and then we become attached to that role, especially the further we get into leadership. And this is the hard thing, because what got you here will not get you there, but we double down and do more of the same thing. And this is what we see going on right now. Everybody doubling down, following. And this is the hard thing. Leadership only happens when there's followership. The first follower is the one who does it. And this is what I see what happened with kind of the social movement now we're in the middle of, we're watching evolve, is that for the longest time, people just kept their head down. That's what you saw. People kept, the new politicians got into office and the other side just kept their head down. Okay, I guess this is who we are. And then when you see the government murdering people, you realize that people started to stand up, and as like dominoes falling, when one stands up and then another and then another and then another, and it creates this new norm where people are cutting through their attachment to who they think they have to be and doing what we know is right. But so this is the interesting thing. When we're forming those neural pathways early on, it's relative to authority. So we form our authority perception and relationships early on. And now, if you're not paying attention, decades later, you transplant those same authority relationships into your adulthood and then begin to relate to your authority, just like you did when you were 3 years old. Thus, you have a lot of blind followers who just do whatever they're told to do and don't stop and really kind of activate their free will. They don't interrupt the pattern. They don't stop and put it down and ask themselves, what is right here? What is truly right? Yeah. And the hard thing is they don't know how, because there's the robot brain, right? So the thing to watch out for, the caveman brain happens when our self-concept that we're attached to, our ego identity, gets challenged or invalidated. Then it sends this cortisol release. Now we're acting emotionally, but we don't really see it because our lens shifts. And so suddenly we show up as this kind of other person that our spouses see and our family sees and our colleagues see and our direct reports see and our supervisors see, but we don't. We know we're right in those moments. So the caveman will absolutely undermine you every time. Secondarily, what spawns the caveman? It is the robot brain. When we're attached to a certain way, when we know, hey, as long as I'm the family hero and always the guy who's right, I'm fine. Now, when somebody challenges me, it releases my own self-doubt. It releases all that emotionality, all that fear, which gets transmuted into anger. What I know to be true is anger is a secondary emotion. It's the one that comes out at the surface. And I have yet to find a time when you dig deep enough, there isn't some more vulnerable emotion under the surface. But we learn so well early on. Big boys don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about. We learn not to be vulnerable. Instead, we come up with vibrato. And this is the equation we see at play here, right? There's some deep insecurity under the surface. And the more, well, I love too to watch the projection of that insecurity that happens, saying, and then suddenly we have leaders saying, I don't want to call them leaders, but I don't have another word right now because that's not leadership. But we have individuals who are in leadership positions, taking their insecurity and projecting it onto others, saying, you're the one doing that. You're the one doing that. Well, here's the truth is everything we see is a projection of our own mind. You only see things through your lens. So when you see everybody else doing something, guess what? That's what's going on in your mind, in your frame, and how you're looking at it. And it's tough to distinguish between your own bias and clearly seeing reality. And the thing my heart warms a little bit to see folks who are done keeping their head down and recognizing that regardless of the cost, leadership is not about being comfortable. It's not about being right. It's not about, it's about doing the right thing to make others better, to elevate others. And when it's keeping people down, that's not leadership. Yeah,
leadership has a moral duty to stand in the right lane. And you can take that how you want it, but
I want to go back though to say that, right? And a moral duty is it's not some dogma that's written down somewhere. For me, this is why it goes full circle back to the notion that if you're doing the right thing, then your mind is at peace. And if your mind is agile, and only you know that, it's an inside job, and it's not based on following somebody else's formula or what your traditional dogma says. That's not morality. Morality is a human to human. It's empathy. It's kindness. It's connection. It's recognizing that we're all in this together. And that's not some dogma written somewhere, and it's not a religious tradition. It's humans side by side together. Yeah. When we behave that way, it's amazing what we can do when we do that. But my goodness, there's so much fear that gets dropped into the middle, and then reactivity and blindness that happens that you can see, I think it's a live action shot to watch what happens when ego runs wild, when fear
you certainly see
and reactivity.
Yeah, pressure. As I was writing some of the script notes for this topic of pressure pops into my head, and I wrote down that pressure exposes leadership quickly. And in mind when I wrote it, it was Eric's walking down the hallway, he's having a normal day, something bad happens, and pressure is applied quickly, and the true individual, like you've just described, comes out, right? And some leaders seem to be able to stay really grounded, and they can stay deliberate, and they can think clearly, even when they're in these high-stake moments, right? But other people, because they're so reactionary, their true colors are coming out, right? They move really, really fast, and they create these unintended consequences, which if you watch if you watch the news, you can see that someone's office is always chasing him around trying to fix his mess. Okay, so there's that. The difference is not always this experience or the intelligence, but it's obviously something deeper. The question that I had written was, what separates leaders who make consistently good decisions from those that under pressure, from those who just react? But I think you've kind of talked about that. But it seems like to me that this separation is more about preparation, mindset, and emotional regulation, which is absent in a lot of what we see today. And for leaders out there who are trying to avoid that, what are some daily practices that we could do to strengthen our decision quality under stress?
Yeah, isn't that wild? Well, one of the things I want to stretch back to something you said and pull it apart a little bit. And you said you see what they're made of, or their true colors. And I understand that directionally. However, I would say it's just a deeper pattern that gets exposed. And it's not really who we are when we're reactive. It's just a deeper pattern that's been latent below the surface. That's not who we are. That's only our attachments and a pattern that's getting activated. When you strip all the patterns away and you sit in the present moment, then you start to just get a glimmer of what's possible as a human. And it doesn't happen through our cognition. It doesn't happen through our story, through our narrative. It doesn't happen through knowledge. Wisdom is a different pathway. And that comes from this deep level of of grounded self-awareness to presence, number one, to be able to be here in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and then to be self-aware. And then from there, step 3 is like intention, right? So that's where movement starts to happen. What I think of it within myself is my ability to sizzle in my own juice,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So when I get triggered, I have a choice. With
Mm-hmm.
awareness, I have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Without awareness, there's no choice. I know what humans will do when they don't have awareness. They'll do the same thing they always did.
Yeah.
They'll do the same thing they trained themselves to do when they were 3
Mm-hmm.
years old. But now
Mm-hmm.
there's adults throwing a tantrum, right?
Yeah.
And tell me, we don't have a lot of examples of adults acting like 3-year-olds throwing tantrums.
Mm-hmm.
This is what separates us, I think, and makes us truly different, is that we have different, I'd say, from most animals. We have this ability to transcend all this, but
Mm-hmm.
it takes work. It takes an ability to be grounded, to be present, to be self-aware, and to allow yourself to not react to the emotion. So you
Mm-hmm.
used the interesting word, emotional regulation. And I like that. I'm always curious about, I mean, there are absolutely techniques to regulate your emotion, but the real work for me is, how do you, well, you don't do that. You don't practice emotional regulation in the moment when there's heightened emotion. So it's like going to the gym. I want to be physically fit. Well, guess what? You have to practice every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, you get there. And the same thing, people want to have the skill of emotional regulation, but they don't. That's something you do every day so that when those moments hit, you have the ability to not react. So you don't just do it in the moment, but you have to go do the reps and exercise your mind to create mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
mental health is something you can nurture.
Yeah.
You can. And, you know, I sure don't nurture it when I'm addicted to the news. You know, I'm
Yeah.
continually filling the space in my head with all of this stuff. And I find myself at some point, my anxiety is elevated and I'm not resting well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have the same
there
problem.
we go. Yeah, right. Like, I just want to.
And you can't get away from it. It's a very difficult thing. I mean, because if the emotional tie to wanting to do a good thing, to see good change, isn't enough, I'm curious if that situation's solved itself or not. If that individual who was attacked has responded, you know, is there a new policy being put in place to prevent things like this from ever happening again? And it leads me to this thought as you were talking that initially, and this is a complete parenthetical, but initially when I first started talking about leadership on a podcast, it was the discrete technical aspects of how to lead a project.
Mm-hmm,
Puts you right to sleep in a second. I did it for practice, really.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we've grown and we've got people like you on the show and we're listening to real leaders talk about real leadership, I realize how important these things are now. In terms of having people come up here and talk about what real leadership looks like. Will it ever make a big difference in that level that we see in the world? I have no idea, but I can tell you that it won't stop me from trying. And I keep thinking about this role of authority and responsibility. And authority has its place and it has a role until it doesn't. And early in a leadership role, authority can create this a bit of structure for things. It can create momentum to get things done. But then over time, a lot of leaders who you do this, they'll discover that the use of authority as a tool to get things done has an event called diminishing returns will start to happen. And it just won't go anywhere after that. But some reason, leaders continue to rely on this idea that they have authority after it stops working. And we kind of see that now. Why do they do that? Why do leaders continuously rely on this thing after the value of it has long gone?
It's a fantastic question and a fabulous observation that they do. And it's a downward spiral, but it goes back in my mind to this conviction we have that we're right. Mm-hmm. And that is the heart and soul of, I see a lot of leaders who are very narcissistic, right? And that helps them because they know that they know and they're doing what they're doing and people follow that. But then at some point, it's a blinder. We don't see the reality. And if we're not right and we're so attached to it, our value comes from us being right. And if we're not, what's that say about us? I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. And that's the fear is anchored to that hidden belief in our own fallibility. I'm a failure. And so what do you see others? I mean, it's interesting to see. And I love it. I love this conversation that it's so easy to be tidy in theoretical. No, look at the reality of the US government right now. And you've never seen an individual who will slander everybody else and say things that have no sophistication, just attacking everybody. Because if it's me, then there's something wrong with me, right? Taking all the fear and insecurity and projecting it on others, that they're no good, they're the failure, they're scumbags or whatever. But underneath it all, it's all based on their own insecurity. That's what we do. We project our own insecurity out into the world. And that's the hard thing when you have authority. I mean, authority is a profoundly positive thing. We're born into the world with a relationship to authority. We do not exist without it. We have parents. We have somebody who looks after us. And so the big experiment over at Zappos to have leaderless teams, right? They failed because leaders are good. If leaders are well-intended and know how to lead, to actually be a leader, like a father to a child who is caring and nurturing and a steward of that human to become better, that's brilliant. However, uneducated leaders who are emotionally reactive and stuck in a pattern become toxic and detrimental and harmful. And that's the thing to me that distinguishes. I mean, the use of authority is a brilliant thing. And it's a brilliant tool to be able to use authority when you need to, if you're in a leadership position. But the key for me is it's all about creating engagement in an organization. The organizations that are the most successful have the highest level of engagement. Now, if you're using authority in a way that's disengaging or creating a huge backlash where 10 million people are creating a movement, you might, and you want to blame them. That's the hard thing. When you are blaming somebody else, you know you're looking the wrong direction. If you see disengagement around you and you are at the top of the food chain in your organization, everybody else is disengaged and you're pointing your finger blaming them, you're looking the wrong direction. You must look inside at yourself, because the way the organization functions is a reflection of what's going on within at the top levels.
Yeah, that's a good analogy for that. You know, the children are a reflection of their parenting. And not to necessarily equate them and analogize to them, but they are. And and you were talking about leadership and the development of leaders. That's a really good segue into this thought of that most leaders, they say they want to develop other people. I want to make a good team of leaders. I want to have a great team. And yet many organizations remain dependent on a very small number of decision makers. And there's a big difference between building strong performers and building leaders who can really think and decide and act and lead independently on their own. What does it take from your perspective to develop other leaders, not just high performers or whatever?
Well, we go back to that emotional regulation and the ability to step into your own and sit in your own fear and discomfort. Because the thing is, I see in too many organizations, I heard one leader say this specifically, I'm not going to train people up because they're just going to leave. They're going to take everything and leave. So what did he do? He had fear. He held all the information close to himself. He made all the decisions himself. He became the bottleneck in the organization. Everybody else felt expendable and they left anyway. It's this fear that and I see this on teams as well with team leaders. The best team leader is one who can remove themselves from the team and the team functions in a highly effective way. The team leader's job is to provide the support and the resources for everybody to level up and to create successful individuals. But if they're successful without me as the leader, what's that say about me? I'm not needed. And if I'm not needed, I'm not good enough. And I see so many leaders too who are so plugged into the idea and it's still active in them to be a producer, to be a taskmaster, to get things done. If I'm not producing and getting tasks done, what's that say about my value, right? And so there's a discomfort that comes to the surface, and that discomfort begins to drive the behavior. Every time when we get pushed out of our comfort zone, what is discomfort? It's fear, it's guilt, it's shame, I should be working harder. I should be the one making the decision. All of these shoulds in our head left over from that neuro programming when we're 3 years old. Now
Uh-huh.
here we are making the same decisions again, and the emotion is in charge of us, and the old scripting's in charge of us, and we're not leading on purpose. We're not leading consciously. This is
Yep.
why upgrading your leadership is so key, and to understand what is leadership. It's not about you being right. It's not about you being comfortable. It's not about you always having the answer. That is not leadership. And if you think it is, you're on the wrong path.
Yeah. And you talk about
Wake up,
upgrading
leadership.
You talk about upgrading your leadership. Here it comes. Leadership growth. Okay, I'm thinking about this as you're talking, and I'm listening to you very closely. Leadership growth can really feel very overwhelming, if you will, especially when becoming a leader. I guess this is more for the younger generation than anybody else, really. It fits them more than someone like me who's been around the block for a little bit.
Right.
But when it's framed as a transformation or a reinvention of you, maybe you're in a 5-year point of your organization and now you've kind of been promoted and you're ready to go. And they're saying to be a leader, you have to do these things. And when it's framed as transformational or a reinvention of you, it can feel quite overwhelming because you feel like you have to change so much. But meaningful change really starts, now you've said this before, but it starts with the small things, the intentional shifts that kind of compound over time, especially when leaders are willing to examine how they show up every single day. If a leader is listening to this today and they wanted to do just one thing differently to upgrade themselves, and that's why I had that word in there specifically for you, what would that be? I mean, it's scenario dependent, I guess, but generally.
No, I've got it. I know what the answer is very clearly. Go to upgradeyourleadership.com and get the book today.
There it is. I love it. If you didn't hear that, the book's coming out March 2nd.
But so, at the heart and soul of it all, for me, it goes back to that mental, the discipline. And the discipline starts with being able to be present. What does that mean? Our minds are addicted to always filling itself with content. And we always want to think. We've trained our mind to always be full. And when your mind is full, there's not room to bring in new perspectives. There's not room. And what do I mean when I say full? We're right. We're good workers. The expertise can be the detriment. And to be able to just learn and practice. I say in your car, if you could, on your commute, turn off your radio, turn off your mind, bring your attention to your breathing, and just be aware of what your senses are perceiving as you are driving viscerally in this present moment. To practice, exercise the mental muscle of presence, to come back here and now. Because as we know, most humans are conditional humans. We live in the future and all the emotion we create and the narrative we create, or we live in the past based on all that narrative and those emotions, right? What are the past-focused emotion? Anger, regret, guilt. Future-focused, we feel angst. We feel frustration about stuff that's not even happening. No, executive presence is the key platform. If you want to evolve and truly become a special leader, if you want to become a leader who really makes a difference, you have to start with executive presence. And that is, when I say executive, I love it because it has a couple meanings, right? One is the presence of an executive who's not caught up and not hooked by everything somebody says and sees the enterprise at a global level. That's one. But seeing your life at a global level. Now, the second part is the executive functions of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, which is the genius brain I talk about. Being able to understand how to access that. And that all comes from that point of presence, to be here now. Just focus on your breathing right here, right now. Everything's okay. And the beautiful thing is, as you practice, just focusing on your breath as you inhale and exhale, the responses in your body start to change. Your heart will slow down. If you do that for 2 minutes, you will watch. Your heart will slow down. Your blood pressure will decrease. Your breathing rate will change. Your tension will start to alleviate in just 2 minutes. If you practice just breathing for 2 minutes, it vastly changes all the systems in your body.
Yep.
And that's regardless of the stimuli around you. Now, imagine if you could do that. Now you're in a board meeting and you're just part of your mind is anchored in the present moment. And you're not letting yourself get washed away by the tide of the frustration of the board or the pointed questions coming at you. You're not completely defended, right? You're not defensive. You're not defended. You're just present, raw, open in this moment. That is such a profound point of wisdom that when leaders are able to do that, and then from that place to truly hear, to truly listen, and to have that kind of awareness of yourself, and then the next step is of others, and to witness others, you absolutely change the game. When you lead yourself first, you change not only work, the way you show up at work, all the relationships in your life. You have better relationships with your spouse, with your family, with your community. And that doesn't mean just laying down and taking things, not at all. But it means not being reactive and aligning with your convictions and your vision. Not based on and this is the hard thing to peel back, because most people have convictions based on their neural programming, right? Well, what do I mean? Oh, most people's political leanings can be predicted by that of their parents. Your parents were on the left side of the aisle, you're going to be on the left. Your parents were on the right side, you're going to be on the right. Where's the free will in all this? How do you learn to actually see reality as it is? And step one, you have to be able to stop all the madness in your own brain, put down the narrative and empty the cup. Just be present. And then from that point, right, to cultivate your ability to be present, to come back to this moment, right here, right now. And it's funny. It sounds so, at some level, it sounds trite. And I'll tell you what, it is one of the more profound and difficult practices you can do over time, but it's completely transformative. It's completely transformative because it pulls out the reason we see, heart attack is built by stress, which is an internal thing, which is us being addicted to that internal narrative, putting that down. It's the doorway to wisdom. Presence is the doorway to our own wisdom. Cultivating that
so much
is
to unpack
essential.
there. Yeah, so much to unpack there. And I think that people, if they're not writing these down as notes on how to, write it down on a piece of paper and put it in your wallet. And when you're just wandering around the hallway in your organization or just sitting around in your lounge chair, should you have one, pop it out and just take a listen to what, or a read of what you've written down from this podcast from the great Dr. Mace. Put it on your hand if you have to. And I've got one. Can I say one thing? Can I say one thing really profound about what you're saying? That idea of putting it back in, right? So if we don't do things like that, we're going to keep replaying the same pattern. We're going to fall into the same beliefs. It's going to drive the same behavior. We're going to keep getting the same results in our life, whether we like it or not. But what you're talking about is taking kernels that work for you and recognizing that presence is key. Okay, practice that and read it and reinforce it. You're actually, as you do that over time, you're actually rewiring how your brain circuitry is formed. You're changing your brain by changing your thinking. And that's powerful. That can't be overstated. Yeah. I had one question that I've queued up, but I don't want to ask it anymore. I've got a better one. I like audibles. There's a book out. I believe it was from General Stanley McChrystal regarding how he led teams during the Iraq invasion in Afghanistan and different places around the world. But anyway, the book is called The Team of Teams. And in there, he describes something you said. I forgot what it was that made me think of it. But he describes how his teams are his garden. And in the garden, you have all of these different types of plants. You've got tomatoes, you've got flowers, you've got whatever, bushes and little other foliage that you're trying to deal with. And that should you go out and say you have a flower bed of all these different types of flowers, hydrangeas and pansies and daisies and roses, and you go out and you throw just one type of fertilizer or food at the entire set, and you're trying to treat all as you should be treating one, then some will fall away and die. And so what he said was that he's got to go in and give care to this one in this way and care to this one in this way. And that one prefers more shadow and that one prefers more exposure. And this one likes water and this one doesn't. And that one likes hot and cold. Leadership is much like that, that if you need to take the time to realize that We have a very unique opportunity in our life when we become leaders, whether it's in a really complex environment or whether it's simplistic at home or whatever the cases are, to lead and make differences, not just in the people that are in our purview, but the world that surrounds all of us. And I think too often we forget this one little thing that's happened personally where someone has affected someone else by leadership, or rather the lack thereof. And they think it's extremely superficial. I'll give you the example. My wife's former boss, was not a great leader. He's not a great leader. So if you're listening to this, I'm talking to you. And she brings that home because then she has to complain. And his mentality when asked about it was, that's the way I lead. I'm just going to paint you with the biggest 7-inch brush I could find, and everybody's going to deal with it the same. It's not the way we do these things. That's not the way it works. And I think if you want to be a good leader and you want to do those things, you got to go and lead yourself first. Pick yourself apart, just like you described. And understand.
And it's an interesting balance, right? Because I've heard people, that's just who I am. Well, guess what? Just who you are isn't working. And when you look at just who you are, you're lying to yourself. It's just a series of patterns you've adopted over the course of your life that validate your self-concept, and it's not getting you the result you want. Now, this is the thing. I think when you peel back the layers, there's the real brilliance. We have brilliance available to us. Like this leader, for example, is not leading brilliantly, but could if he was willing to. Sometimes that kind of, maybe it comes off as a broad brush. I mean, there's certain elements of what that leader does that if he could do it with intention, instead of being dictated by these patterns, could choose on occasion when he needed to show up that way, or she, it would be brilliant when it becomes a choice. But without awareness and presence, it's not a choice. It dictates and drives us. And when we do it differently, we feel like there's some emotion connected, right? It's, oh, we're failing. We're doing it wrong. We're not good enough. So we just do more of this thing and say, nope, this is the way I lead. Get over it. And I've seen this through like assessments. I love DISC and Myers-Briggs and do all these with all my clients. And I've the whole point is with awareness to behave differently, to choose. But I've seen people say, oh, I'm just an ISTJ. It's just the way I am.
Yeah. No, I don't like it when they ask me that question. I'm like, what does that define really? Yeah.
Right. And it's not, I mean, I love it because it can help people understand their blind spots. But when people come back and say, well, that's just who I am, then they're missing it.
And I've seen that where people have said, I'm ISTJ and this is what I do. I'm like, why are you beholden to that? Tomorrow you might not be. No, this is the great thing. In my mind, I want to say this is what I would encourage anybody who knows Myers-Briggs to say, I'm ISTJ and this is my work to do. Yeah.
Right. My work to do is to, understand that the tight, regimented, detailed orientation works in some situations. And sometimes it's going to shoot me in the foot.
Yeah.
The work is evolution.
When I've taken mine, I've said that same thing. Like, these are the things I'm going to take away from it. They're my tools. One thing you said earlier, and this would be my final question for you, because I have to leave some content for number 4, is, and I think this is very pertinent to the things we've been talking about. And I hope people understand that this particular podcast, this one we're talking about, has a very particular line that we may not have taken before, but because the world needs it right now, especially in America. How does, rather than a question, actually, I'm going to state this. Control currently seems to be really good at masquerading itself as responsibility. I'm not controlling. I'm not doing this because I must have my way. It's my responsibility to do this to all of you. Yeah, that's a bad situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our minds are so tricky. We will convince ourselves that we're right. So what I've written about is, for me, it's a 4-step process, right? When I think about leading consciously, and the last step is vision, and vision clarity is got to be grounded to this kind of moral, ethical foundation that we talked about, doing right by people, which again, it goes back to with your thoughts, you create it. So if you're in angst, then because of the decisions you're making, then you're probably not making the right decisions.
Yep.
And this is the interesting thing, when you make decisions, and it's the hard decisions sometimes, but when you behave with complete integrity, then you rest easier.
Yeah.
That's the point of peace, right? That's the point of contentment. When you do not the scripting that you've been. That's the hard thing, because the mind is tricky, right? So we'll convince ourselves that I'm right, so therefore I must. But when you can really cultivate that sense of presence, to be present within yourself and your own emotional reactivity, and when you can start to notice the patterns in your thinking, I mean, it takes a warrior to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody is willing to do that. Ignorance and being right is so much more blissful, even if it's disastrous, even if it's detrimental, even if it creates chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes so much strength, and it takes a true warrior to be able to, as I said before, sizzle in your own juice, observe yourself without reacting, to have that state of equanimity, and then behave in a way that is aligned with the right thing, regardless of how it feels in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like letting down your guard, stepping into vulnerability, stepping into empathy, compassion, openness, listening. These are the things that make our country great. Mm-hmm. And it's not anger and hatred, but yet that's the stuff you see continually being forced forward. And anger and hatred is a blockage of our natural state. Our natural state, if you can get through it, is this wide open energy that is pulsing through us. That's only available through that open door of presence. So when you stop and you're present, just to be able to experience, there's this pulsing of energy, electrical energy in you every given moment, and it's wide open in its potential. And as you block that, right, that's the thing. When you start to block our natural fluid state through the constraints we learned early on, to be the helpful one, to be the pleaser, to be right, to be the strong one, to be the whatever it is, the winner, the competitor, that gets blocked, right? It blocks our natural energy state, and it's going to contort our emotion and leave us feeling ways we don't like. It's going to leave us feeling what I said before, the buried emotions that so many of us feel, whether it's shame or guilt or regret or whatever. We don't like that, so we double down, make ourselves right. Yeah. It's such a crazy journey. But I tell you what, wisdom and true leadership is available to each human being right now in this moment. If you can step into that present moment, it's amazing what is possible. Yeah. And just step into the vulnerability of the moment, and we are better. We can be better. We must be better starting this very moment, because that's all there is this moment. When you step into that, you open the door to lead in a way that the world needs right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can safely say we've got passion for this, for making people better, for making things better. And, we can't equate a simple podcast to national change, but the reality of it is that regardless of where people sit and what colors they wear and where they come from and what they do, positive change is happening all the time, all over the place. The purpose of what we do is to make people better, and I do that for myself. To go back really quickly about what you said about genuineness of the feeling of just trying to be kind, have an ethical compass and a moral compass of what we're trying to do, to be right, to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. There is no debt when I do that. If I'm creating chaos and I'm doing things, there's debt to pay, whether it's today or tomorrow. You're going to be paying for it. Mm-hmm. But if I'm doing the right thing and I go to sleep at night and my wife says, how do you feel about how you handle that situation? I handled it with truth, honesty, transparency, and with a moral compass that I wanted the right thing for that person. Mm-hmm. Whatever happens after that, I owe nothing for that. And so I think
I want to come back to the metaphor of the garden, right? We're planting seeds all the time with our mind.
Yeah.
And when we're planting seeds where our mind is in a state of anger and hatred and that kind of revulsion that I see happening, when we plant those seeds, that's the world we're going to create.
Yeah.
That's the world we're going to live in. But the beautiful thing is, watch, it all comes back to your mind. Watch how you allow your mind to think. from a place of presence, to start to have that awareness to say, no, I'm going to plant seeds right now of positive, of kindness, of empathy, of openness. When you plant those seeds, that's the world you begin to live in.
Yep.
World peace and contentment and a strong society isn't an external thing. It's an inside job. It starts with every individual. And the same thing, leadership. Leadership isn't waiting for somebody else to do something. It's an inside job. It starts now. You must lead yourself first. That's the beginning, middle, and end of it. Everything else is a story we create.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Mays, thank you so much. It's always great having you. Each time that we talk, I always learn something new, and I really appreciate your time and your insights. And it's just a conversation in general. It's just really amazing. And so thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. And one more call out, upgradeyourleadership.com. Go check it out. Get pre-order for the book if it's before March 5th, and help me out, because we're going to make this thing and get the word out.
Yep.
I'm passionate about it, as you are too. I'm on a mission, help people learn to be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
My God, we need it.
Yep. If you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can catch us on Instagram at The Change Agent Podcast, and you can catch us on our website at www.thechangeagent.studio. Until then, you'll see all of Dr. May's stuff, links and all that good stuff down in the show notes, and then we'll be pushing this out. And of course, upgradeyourleadership.com is easy to remember. So get out there and do it. Dr. Mays, thank you again. Great talking to you, and I can't wait to the March 5th date.
Thank you. Be well.
You as well.